World of RPGs, Episode 16, Austria. Welcome to the World of RPGs, a podcast in which we travel around the globe and learn about the local role-playing game scenes. I'm your host Mo Bartz, and in Episode 16 we're going to Austria. Yeah, I had to follow up Germany with Austria because they also speak German there, and I thought there would be some overlap in the games they play. Let's start with the country. Austria, or Österreich, has a population of about 9 million people and is in the Alpine Mountains in South Central Europe. And the majority religion is Roman Catholicism, though like all over Central Europe, actual religiosity is strongly in decline. The main language is a southeastern dialect of German, and as a northern German myself, that's a bit like being an American visiting England. You understand most of it when you are in major cities, but small things might be quite different. And if you go anywhere outside the big cities, you might be lost. Especially the Viennese dialect can sound quite charming for Germans. It's as if they try to lure you into their dreams of empire in their little coffee shops via psychoanalysis. But honestly, in written form, it's almost identical. I have visited Vienna a couple of times in the past, but never managed to go to a game shop or learn about local TTRPGs, so all of this episode was new to me. And as always, we start with the GM of the actual play we heard last episode.
My name is Markus Wittmer. I have lived in Vienna, Austria for 25 years now. I have actually been born and raised in Switzerland. And 25 years is half my life, so I just turned 50 this year. I started role-playing games in, I think it must have been 85, because I asked my parents for a box of Das Schwarze Auge, The Dark Eye, for Christmas, because there was television ads at that time for role-playing games in the German television. And I was duly fascinated by the idea of role-playing games. And I was a little disappointed when I opened the box and it was just a few pieces of paper, a few booklets and dice, but I got into the game and played a lot as a child, or actually was forever GM as a child. Then had a little break when I was at university for some time, got back when I had an exchange year in Scotland where you get these student societies, and there was a role-playing society, and I met some friends there and we started playing Warhammer Fantasy. This was sort of my second big love. Then I got into Call of Cthulhu and actually worked as a freelancer, right? Did some translations and some editing and some writing for the German version of Call of Cthulhu. And this was, I think, when I really started becoming part of the role-playing scene. And that led to me having a first role-playing game podcast, and then the second one, which is still going, which is 3W6, or as we say in German, 3W6 podcast.
Okay, so just for the listeners, the W is for Würfel, so that's German for dice. So it's like 3d6.
Yes. We have discussed if we should call it 3d6 in English, but I mean, it makes it just really difficult to find. If you look for 3d6, that's really hard to Google anyway. And then podcast. No, it's 3w6, 3w6.
Okay, so one thing we maybe have to clear up, because you said you were born in Switzerland and now you're in Austria, and then you work for a German company. So as I said in the introduction to the episode, in Austria they also speak German, and then you would probably also be from the German-speaking part of Switzerland, I guess.
Exactly, yeah, that is true.
Do you see any big differences between these three countries concerning the role-playing game scenes?
I couldn't really tell you a lot about the Swiss role-playing scene because I haven't spent a lot of time playing there except as a child when I was really, really isolated and simply did not know that there was more than one game. I didn't know that there was anything more than The Dark Eye, and there wasn't an internet at the time, and there wasn't a lot of media, there were no conventions. So I think there are some similarities between Switzerland and Austria in that they are very small countries, and the German-speaking part of Switzerland and all of Austria, when it comes to role-playing games, are always sort of dependent on what Germany does, and is also, our gazes are turned towards Germany when it comes to what is the scene like, and any efforts that are done in the countries themselves are always also orientated towards the German market because our markets are just tiny. And if you're working within a niche, then it's really, really hard to sell anything when we talk about economical terms here.
But there are some genuine Austrian games, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. There have been a lot of initiatives. I mean, in our TTRPG scene, the difference between a fan playing a game, writing their own setting, somebody publishing something like in a fanzine or as an indie creator and actually publishing something for money, potentially for money, is minute, right? So there have been some products coming out from Austria like Finsterland, and more recently, Gazer Press has published a lot. And there are a lot of people who actually work in the scene and work on products. So people working, for instance, a translator of the German version, Kern, the OSR game. He lives in Vienna. Also translators and editors for DCC, Dungeon Crawl Classics, the German version, both published at System Matters, which is also the publisher that I freelance for as a translator as well.
Okay, so which works have you translated?
As I said in the past, I worked for Call of Cthulhu, so a few books there. But for System Matters, I translated Dread, the Jenga tower-based horror one-shot role-playing game. Then I translated Star-Crossed, the other Jenga game. For some reason, I stuck with the Jenga games. More recently, I have translated Worldwide Wrestling, the best professional wrestling role-playing game in the world. And my next project will be, it's not published yet, but it's in layout, is Dialect, the storytelling game about languages and how they die. That was published by Thorny Games and Catherine Himes a few years ago. For a game about language, it's very relevant to have a local language version, so I'm really happy that we will hopefully publish that very soon.
Have you had any challenges there in the translation? Anything that was difficult to transport?
Well, yes, a few of them, right? On the one hand, there's a lot of linguistics stuff in there. So there's the phonetic alphabet, and there are rules for creating new words in this new language that you are creating in the game. And of course, you have to adapt that to sort of the cultural circle we're going to publish that in. Luckily, many, many years ago, I have studied German linguistics and English linguistics at the University of Zurich. So I had a little bit of context. I could still remember some stuff from that. So that made it a little bit easier. And then the second thing that's interesting is in the game, you are playing cards with concepts on them, like concepts like friend or form of address or greeting. And then you're creating new words for that in your dialect in that game or for your community. So sometimes a relatively abstract description of that term is perfect in English and really hard to translate. For instance, there is a card called honorific. And honorific is, on the one hand, a form of address, but at the same time, it can also be sort of a title. And I just had to make a decision, which one is it? Which am I going to take? Or for instance, there is good luck and there is happiness. Potentially, these two are the same word in German, Glück. And then you have to make a decision. Is one of them Glück and the other Zufriedenheit? Or is it Glück gehabt or something like that? So it's these nuances that you always, I'd say those are the great challenges. And maybe to wrap one up, there were some quotes which are actually sometimes poems in the book. And my absolute piece of pride is in the very last section of the book, and most people will probably never see it, but there's a little section out of a book by Dr. Seuss, which has never been translated to my knowledge into the German language. And somehow I managed to get the rhyme in there and get the translation that sort of replicates what the original was. And that's just really fun. Huge challenge, but also fun.
You talked about the wrestling game, and you also have an actual play about it. Can you tell us about that one?
Yeah, that was actually sort of a test run for my translation. What happened to us, especially during the pandemic, is that we wanted to play games online with our community, with our listeners. And that sort of skyrocketed during the pandemic, obviously. And what I was able to do in that context was run a 10-session, 10-week campaign where people could drop in and drop out with their wrestling characters, but it was a continuous story about this particular wrestling promotion called 3D Wrestling. And it all culminated in the last session where everybody could come back, and we had a huge Royal Rumble style fight that lasted for 2.5 hours. But of course, in wrestling, the actual wrestling match is not really about fighting, it's about storytelling. We was telling stories, and beautiful stories, in the ring.
And this group of people, were they all from Austria or were they from the different countries?
No, it's mixed. So we have a lot of people from Germany, because I think what I haven't talked about is that our podcast has a strong storytelling game focus and indie game focus. And people who like these kind of games sort of flock to our community, and it's more like that. So many people who speak German and who like indie games, storytelling games, will listen to the podcast / play with us online or as part of our conventions here in Vienna. So I'd say it's like 2/3 German and 1/3 Austrian.
Okay, because I was listening to it and I was trying to find out, are they the different dialects? Can you place that somewhere? But obviously there's a continuum between Austrian German and the Bavarian German, for example, I would guess. There's been a place in Austria which I visited where I didn't understand the people in the street. That was in Vorarlberg.
Yeah, they are very close to Switzerland, and you can hear it.
Yeah, I was traveling to Liechtenstein by train from Stuttgart through Austria to Liechtenstein. It was a bit of a long trip.
As you say, there's a continuum of dialects, and the German language is very diverse in that way. So if you're in the very west of Austria or the very east of Switzerland, people are basically, speaking the same dialect, same as for the south of Germany and north of Switzerland. And then it changes, and actually somebody from Constance is much closer linguistically to somebody from St. Gallen than they are to somebody from Hamburg. And that is, just in the nature of language.
Has that ever formed any issue in an actual play or in any meeting?
Yeah, well, yes. In an actual play, not so much. But sometimes when people meet at our conventions and so on, you notice that, for instance, the food is always called different things. And that sometimes leads to confusions. Or there are just words also in the standard Austrian language that do not exist in the standard German language. Like you would say something like, for a small break where you're having a snack. When you're in the south, you would maybe say Brotzeit or something. And in the north, I don't know what you say. But in Austria, you say Jause, which again, you wouldn't say in Switzerland. So if you say, hey, let's have a break and have a snack, everybody would say a different thing. And then it doesn't really lead to confusion. It's just a laugh and people get to know each other. So actually, I think it's very enriching.
So on the 3W6 website, I also saw there's not just the podcast, but there's more around it, like even your own publications. Is that right? Can you maybe say a bit more about that?
Yeah, we're not really publishers, but since that whole community thing and our Discord really blew up and we had our own conventions, and also during the pandemic and even after the pandemic, online conventions, there have been some initiatives that we were able to support because we are supported by our listeners with a Patreon. And for instance, we had a game jam about games in the carved from Brindlewood space, so based on Brindlewood Bay or materials for Brindlewood Bay. We had another game jam that was all about games themed around music. And most recently, and we're back to System Matters, we were taking part in the System Matters fanzine competition, so to speak. And again, there I didn't do much. I did the layout for the fanzine, but everybody else, so like 5 or 6 people active in our community, contributed games, scenarios, articles, and we ended up with like 86-page fanzine rather than fanzine. It's a really thick booklet. So I think what we are able to do by having so many people who are really, really enthusiastic about games, like in the PBTA space, in the Fate space, in things like that, they are also eager to create. And we are able to facilitate that with a little money or by just providing the space where they can exchange.
So you mentioned conventions. So how's the convention scene like in Vienna, for example?
Yeah, that's a bit of a sad story, really. I think what we don't have in Austria as a whole is any big convention, like you have NordCon in Germany, for instance. What we have is a lot of small, either special interest or very local conventions that are based on individual initiatives or initiatives by gaming clubs. Let's put it like this. So if you look at Vienna, we are a relatively small 60 to 80 people convention where, as I said, you have half of the people or 2/3 of the people coming from Germany or other places, or sometimes also Switzerland. There is one big event in Vienna that has been going on for many years with some breaks and also some changes in people behind that, and that's called Spielefest or like Game Fest. But that's mainly board games, and it has been for many, many years, but there was always a role-playing game part in that. That was also hosted by some gaming clubs here in Vienna. There used to be a small convention called Don't Panic Convention. It went on also, I think, for 10 years, which was also a charity thing where you'd collect money for a good cause. This is very near and dear to my heart because that is actually where I met my wife. And then you have a lot of local stuff. You have, for instance, not just in Vienna, but around Vienna, a gaming club in a small town close to Vienna called Bewahrer Imaginärer Welten, and they have like meetups. Then you have in Upper Austria, Oberösterreich, that's near Linz, if you have heard of that city. There's a small town that has a gaming club. They have like their own little place also rented, and they have their own convention. I went there for some years as well. And they created their own little gaming scene in that very small town just because somebody wanted it to exist, right? So that's really, really impressive. And I think that's typical of Austria. And I think it's even worse in Switzerland or similar in Switzerland, that you have smaller initiatives that crop up if people are really, really motivated. But sometimes if they're not motivated anymore, they also go away. But you do not have those really big events like NordCon, definitely not exclusively for role-playing games.
Okay, but you do have gaming shops, don't you?
Yes, I think now, again, recently we have like 3, depends on your definition, right? But if you're looking at the ones that at least carry role-playing games, I think we have 2 in Vienna. If you're looking at really a specialist one that has a lot of different games and some variety in there and also has, Fiasco or Games by System Matters, then there's really only one. And that has been different in the past. We had like 3 to 4 full-blown TTRPG shops in the past, but there's a lot of ups and downs in that market. I wanted to add a small detail about our conventions, which might be interesting to all our international listeners as well. It's connected to the podcast. So we do a lot of interviews with international designers. So if you're an English speaker, you can actually listen to our podcast even if you don't speak German by just selecting English episodes and listening to our interviews with indie game designers. So we have basically almost everybody who published an influential game on the podcast, which makes me really proud and is basically a huge motivating factor for me to do the podcast. And most recently, when we started up having our on-site conventions again after the pandemic, we were also able to invite guests of honor. So our first guest of honor was Alex Roberts, designer of Starcrossed and For the Queen, for instance. Last year, we had Jason Cordova, who is the designer behind Brindlewood Bay and The Between. And this year, we will actually have the designer of Dialect, Catherine Himes, with us. So I think it's just a great feature of the TTRPG scene in general and the indie TTRPG scene specifically that there is just not a lot of difference and not a lot of distance between the fan and the creator. And, you can just buy a ticket for the convention and meet these people. And since this is a 60 to 80 people convention, everybody gets to talk to the guest of honor, which I love. The convention is almost sold out, so that's not a promotional thing. But I just wanted you to know, if you want to listen into the conversations, which we will also partly record, you can do that after our convention in August.
So Markus mentioned Gazer Press and Finsterland as genuine Austrian products. Let's start with Gazer Press.
My name is Markus Schauter. I'm a journalist with focus on Middle East. And I came into role-playing games. It was maybe the end of 80s, beginning 90s. I was 13 or 14 years old when I was on a vacation in Germany. And I went into this game store and saw these great books labeled Das Schwarze Auge, the Black Eye. And my budget was low at this time. I was a kid. So I could not afford the big rule box. So I just bought an adventure for levels, I think it was 15 to 16. And I opened the book and I immediately saw, wow, this is great. I really want to play this, but I have no clue how to play this role-playing game. I had no idea what a role-playing game is. So a neighbor at my relative's house where I lived at this time, they had the rules. So I just copied them, brought them back to Austria, and then infected all my friends, which became big fans of role-playing games. So we played Das Schwarze Auge for many years. Then we switched to Shadowrun with some short incursions into Lord of the Rings and AD&D. Yeah, so this was my introduction to role-playing games.
I have a quick question about Shadowrun in Austria. So there are some German language exclusive supplements. Are you aware of these and what's written about Austria in them?
At this time we played it, you had the adventure set in Germany, for sure. And America, I remember adventure in Seattle. And you had all the translations in German, for sure. We didn't play adventure set in Austria, no. I can't remember this. Maybe they have it now, but I think they didn't have in the middle of the 90s. I'm not aware of it.
Where did the adventures take place? Did they take place in Vienna in 2053 or in Berlin or Seattle?
No, it was in Berlin and Seattle, not in Vienna.
Was there a reason for that?
I think we just oriented ourselves on the published adventures. We didn't write our own adventures for Shadowrun. I did write my own adventures for Das Schwarze Auge, but I didn't write my own adventures for Shadowrun. So we just took the published adventures and they played in Germany, Berlin, or US, Seattle.
But now you have your own publishing house. Can you say something about that?
So I quit to play role-playing games around maybe 2004, 2005, something like this. And I made a break for around 10 years. And when I came back to role-playing games, I had a different approach. I didn't just play the games. I was very interested in the history of role-playing games, in the mechanics, how you can modify them. So I read a lot about the beginnings of the hobby in the 17th and 18th in the US and this kind of stuff. And then I gathered the group and we continued to play. But we choose at this time the rule set of Lamentations of the Flame Princess because it is a very light one. And I started to play with people who had no idea how role-playing games work. So I didn't want to dig into, hundreds of pages deep rule sets and then I have to learn and I have to explain to them. We just wanted to play, just give us a light rule set and all it's fine. So it was Lamentations. And somehow I thought, well, I earn my money as a journalist with writing. So I can write, I know how to write. Why not publishing my own adventure? And this process took around a year, maybe a year and a half until it was finished. And then it was in 2020 when I officially opened this publishing house, Gazer Press, and published my first adventure, The Saint of Bruckstadt.
Okay, and what is that adventure about?
I'm influenced by Das Schwarze Auge, for sure. And there are rarely adventures playing in dungeons. So dungeons are very seldom in this setting. And then there is Dungeons and Dragons, where for sure dungeons play a big role. And somehow I wanted to combine both of them. So the Saint of Bruckstadt, it has this world. The player can can explore with ruin and this bog and town and the graves. And then there is this 5-level dungeon. First, the dungeon was much bigger. I understood that I had to compress it. So in the end, 5 levels deep. Yeah, this was the first adventure, and it was set in the 17th century. And this was kind of my thing with publishing my own adventures. I decided they are set in the 17th century. Why? Because, I wanted this historical background. There are many parts of the world not explored by Europeans still. It's not the classic, typical medieval fantasy setting. It's the 17th century. You already have the pistols and guns, which I love as weapons. But at the same time, the Enlightenment is decades away. So there are still strange traditions, which are big inspiration for writing adventures. So this was the setting. And my group and me, we always preferred not high fantasy, but low fantasy settings. So we have this in the historical settings, human-centered, where magic exists, but it's kind of secret science. And there's always not the monster behind each corner. Humans can also be monstrous. So it's completely fine to have, 80% of the NPCs are humans. And monsters, if they appear, they are always something special. So this was the idea for the settings. I wanted to write adventures. And yeah, this was the start.
Okay, you said 17th century. And where is it set?
So far, 3 books have been published, and they are all set in Germany. So the Saint of Bruckstadt, it was a fictional town somewhere in Germany. But the following 2 adventures, I had very specific places. The one is in the Schwäbischen Alb, so mountains in Germany. And the other is set in Nordhausen, a German town. So I want to follow these historic backgrounds, but we don't want to focus only in Germany. We are now working on our 4th book. It's a campaign set in the Egyptian harbor town of Alexandria. So we want to cover also this North Africa part of the world. Adventures are planned set in the 17th century pirate towns of Tunis, Tripolis, Algiers. We have ideas for an adventure setting on Sainte-Marie, the island in the Indian Ocean, which was a pirate hotspot also in the 17th century. There are the Americas we have ideas for. So we want to expand away from the German, Middle European places where there is the 30 Years' War, going to other places. So in the end, our players can play the whole world, but always in the 17th century and always with connections to the 30 Years' War. So also the campaign set in Egypt will have connections to the 30 Years' War going on in Germany.
Why did you choose that particular time?
Because I think this time of the 30 Years' War, there's a lot of going on in Europe. And it's also a setting which is kind of dark and hopeless. This war going on, all these devastations, the cruelties, the Black Death, the famines. And for my adventures, I preferred this kind of dark settings. So I thought Europe at this time would be the perfect background to play this kind of adventures.
I mean, I'm not a linguist, but for the non-German speaking people, an interesting thing about that time is also it's like roughly the oldest time when you can still understand the German language. Unlike the medieval German, which is really hard to understand. But the stuff from the 30-Year War, so the mid-17th century, if you read poems about the war from that time, you can still kind of understand them. It's a bit like Shakespearean English, which for English speakers, if you concentrate a bit, you can understand it.
Exactly. When you read the sources about the 30 Years' War, and there are a lot of sources you can read, as you said, you can understand this kind of German language.
Are you planning to do anything set in Austria then?
Sure, definitely. There will be an adventure set in Vienna. I mean, it has to be. But the thing is, the publishing house, until now, it's just me writing. So the output per year is not very high. If we publish a campaign adventure like the Alexandria adventure, which has around 200 pages, it takes me around a year to write it, to produce it until it's published and back, and then to sell it. So our output is a small one. I have plenty of ideas for adventures set in Vienna and North Africa and in the Indian Ocean, but I need time to produce all those books.
And is this system agnostic or is it written with a specific system in mind?
It's not system agnostic. Our books are published in German and English, both. The German version now is written for Swords and Wizardry because a German publishing house translated Swords and Wizardry into German. So we support this rule set with our adventures. And the English versions are written for Lamentations of the Flame Princess until now. But we are now also working on our own rule set, which will not be published until 2025. But in the future, we will have our own rule set and publish for our own rule set.
So the website of Gazer Press is available in German and in English. And you just said the games are also in both languages. Were there any issues translating it from one language to the other?
The first book, The Saint of Brokstadt, I translated. But I'm not a professional translator. I'm not a professional English speaker. So I now cooperate with a professional English translator, with Thilo, and he does the proofreading and the lecturing of the texts. So now we have really high quality English texts available for our customers, and I think this is the right way to go. He has many years of experience in translating role-playing books from German into English and the other way, so he knows his business, and that's the way to go.
And were there any cases where he contacted you because he didn't know how to translate something or any concept that was difficult to transport?
Not really. He really knows the rule set of Lamentations, and often, I'm not so clear concerning the rules of Lamentations, so he's very good in correcting and finding these little pieces to add, which makes the rule side clear for our readers. It works fine. There are no problems between German and English.
They're closely related languages.
Yes, exactly.
So on your website, you have information about these books and a shop, but you also have a blog. Can you maybe say a bit about that?
Yeah, as I told you, when I came back to the hobby of role-playing games, I became very interested in the history of role-playing games. So I read a lot of books and thought about this, and I just wanted to publish some of my thoughts or interesting things I read about on this blog. So that's what I do. For example, the role of hirelings in early D&D, or the structure of the games. In former time, they had a player and he was called the caller. Why? Because the groups tended to be much bigger than they are normally now. The group discussed what they want to do next, and then the caller told the game master after this what they decided to do. So he was the connection between the big player group and the game master. So I also write about these things.
Yeah, one of the most fascinating articles, and I think it's only available in German at the moment, is the one about the gaming shop in Lebanon. So how did that come to be?
I think I got inspired about your work, and because of my work as a journalist, we focus on Middle East. I'm interested in culture and society of Middle East. So I thought to myself, okay, why not talk to those guys about role-playing games? Because first I talked to the guys from Istanbul, and after this to this man from the role-playing shop in Beirut. It was interesting to talk to them because other than in Europe, the big OSR movement we have in Europe and in the US is not very widely known or played in Lebanon, for example, where they are all on classical Dungeons and Dragons. And it's very role gamey. So, when they gather to the table, they use clothes and hats and they change their voices. So it's really very much focused on role-playing game, and not so much as I know it from my rounds, which are very problem-oriented. It is not so much about role-playing, playing your role, but it's just how to deal with the guard at the door or how to open the box without activating the trap. So it's more a technical side view on the game, and they had a very role-play. So it's interesting.
But let's come back to Austria, because this is not the Lebanon episode. So since you came to role-playing games while on vacation in Germany, and you're now in Vienna and write adventures set in Germany, but also thinking about Austrian ones, do you see any differences between the role-playing scene between the two countries?
Yeah, sure. From the view of a publisher, I have to say most of my books I can sell in Germany and not in Austria. So the market in Germany is for sure a much bigger one than it is in Austria. That's the first point. Yeah, therefore you have much more publishing houses, and also the big publishing houses are in Germany, not in Austria.
And now we come to the unique Austrian setting, Finsterland.
So my name is Georg Pils, and I am from Austria, from Vienna to be exact. I got into role-playing when I was 4 years old because my father bought the red box for Dungeons & Dragons in the German translation back in the day. That was in 1984 because he read about it in the very respectable Austrian newspaper, Die Presse. And these people said, this role-playing stuff, you have to try this. This is the new shit from America. So he bought this, he opened the box, he tried to read the books, and he decided he didn't understand it. So he put it into a cupboard and never cared about it again. Once I was 4 years old, I was basically trying to discover all the little secrets that were hidden in our apartment. And so one day I opened the cupboard and I saw a man fighting a dragon. And then my heart was stolen forever. Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, I forced the babysitter to read the rules and try to explain them to me, and she didn't understand them either. So I decided to just, wing it, go with it. Yeah, I did just that, and eventually I still didn't get it, but I was very, very into it, and I spent some time with friends of mine who were also into it because there was a dragon, a warrior, and they were fighting, so that was amazing. And much later, when I was like 11 or 12 years old, friends of mine introduced me to Das Schwarze Auge, the most German of role-playing games, the dark eye for the international audience. And what happened next was that I started DSR, the Schwarzes Auge, at first edition or second edition, something like that. And one thing led to the other. And then I decided that, whatever these guys were doing, I could also do or even do better. And that's when I started designing role-playing games.
Before we come to these, what other games do you play except D&D and DSA?
Well, right now we're in our 15th year of the Barbarat campaign. Just going on and on and on and on. It's cute, I like it. It's very German, very Karl May, but also kind of gross. I don't know. But we're doing this, it's been going on. I have a regular group and we play every week. But we also are currently playing the Escher campaign for Midgard, the other German role-playing game. So we're very old schooling right now, but that's just the way it is. Otherwise, I do enjoy Cthulhu, but who doesn't? And I have a special spot in my heart for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. First edition, kinda. Second edition, a lot. Fourth edition was a bit too crunchy for me, but I like it. And then, I am a child of the 80s, so obviously the whole World of Darkness, vampire, werewolf stuff. It was great. And now, when I look at it now, I think it's, as young people say today, cringe, but in a good way. Anyway, so it's weird. Other than that, I have a friend who is very much into all the role-playing games, and he has an encyclopedic knowledge of this. So whenever he feels like it, he says, here is this very obscure Korean role-playing game which I translated using toilet paper and a conversational encyclopedia from 1953, and we're not going to play it. You all play different household appliances. So I try a lot of weird stuff because a friend of mine tries a lot of weird stuff, and I always say yes when he says it's time. So, yeah, I don't have a go-to system.
Okay, and then you went on to design your own material.
Doesn't everybody do that? I mean, I'm not sure. I think house ruling is to role-playing as making up things on the spot is to being a kid. I mean, as soon as you start role-playing, you think, that is nice, but it could be better. And it started the same way with me. It was just that, we'll drop these rules. Let's not talk about encumbrance. This is boring. Let's do something else. I would like to have 5 skills instead of 4. Can I have 5 skills? Something like that. And in our case, I've always been tinkering with the whole concept. And I have a very good friend who is basically me, but a little bit different. So he says he's my brother from another mother. And his name is Gregor. I'm called Georg, so it's really, it's a bit on the nose. Well, it all started with, he wanted to do something with pirates. And I said, pirates. And I said, okay, we're going to do this very simple. So we started with a White Wolf Heartbreaker. Write down these attributes, write down these skills. And then make a list of special abilities that your characters have. And that was the start of Finsterland. Because we started with this pirate thing and went on for a while, and it was quite nice and produced a fair number of nice memes. And then we found out that, pirates is nice, but that was I think that was before Pirates of the Caribbean, so it was just not as much a thing. And we were all pretty much into steampunk at that point. One thing led to the other, and yeah, here we are. So it just, necessity is the mother of invention.
So what's in the game? So what are the rules like and the setting especially?
Okay, so the rules are, if you look at it, you can see the heritage of White Wolf, World of Darkness style engine, or Shadowrun if you want to. It's this dice pool concept that was very popular in the 90s, and we just ran with it because, well, we were all from a very small country up in the mountains. We don't get new stuff. So back in the day, we did it with this engine. But the charm is, as always, in the setting. And the setting is something that, to my knowledge, hasn't been done all that much or hasn't ever been done, which is continental Europe during the 19th century, turn of the 20th, but low intensity fantasy. So if you look at things like Castle Falkenstein, then you have this high fantasy concept. You get all the cool stuff. I thought, well, I kind of like German romantics, and I ended up just stealing from E.T.A. Hoffmann or Heine. Also, Heine is always a good idea. Ooh, I'm not sure whether Heine counts as a romantic. Well, I stole wherever I could. Steal quick, steal a lot. Also, we obviously took stuff from Goethe, because if you're doing something in German, you should have some Goethe in it. And we also went all around Central Europe, took some stuff from Czechia, took some stuff from Hungary, Northern Italy, France, stuff like that. There's a lot to take. We just mashed it together, and that's our setting. It's very fin de siècle, if you want to, with this big empire that is in a state of crisis after a big war. And there's this whole lot of technological progress. You have cars, you have some kind of cyberware, which is called Machine. There are scientists that are working on splitting the basic unit of magic, the town. And there are people who say that this is very dangerous and we shouldn't go on in that direction because who knows what power we will unleash if we go there. So you have this extreme progress, airships, steam engines, biplanes, all the fancy stuff, complicated stuff, the high rises, skyscrapers. And at the same time, you have this ancient world, the traditions, the system of social class, still with the aristocracy on top and bourgeois, and then a long, 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 long way down to the poorest of the poor. And you also have this ancient stuff, the monsters that lurk in the fringes of the world. The magic, all the things that people that are serious are saying, well, either we study it academically or we don't stop talking about it. And there's this tension. There's a tension between the drive to modernity and the dangers that come with unstoppable technological progress, and also the danger of falling back into a dark age. And so it's nice. There's a lot to do in this world, plenty of conflict.
And you also have a whole bunch of supplements for it, don't you?
Yeah, over time we just added stuff. We had the starting book, which we also translated to English. In German, there is a book on magic, a book on technology. Then there's it's a generalized book. It's called the Compendium. It just contains various stuff and also the capital city of the country, Finsterland, as a detailed campaign setting. So you'll get plenty of adventure hooks and materials that you can just play there. And then we have a few published adventures that you can just buy and run with your group. Several, actually, but by now it just grew. I'm also perpetually working on the big campaign that will, let's say, crown this whole project. But also, since we all got old and we all got kids and we all got jobs, development cycles got longer and longer. But I just finished the script for book 3 a couple of weeks ago. Book 3 of the campaign, and we're going to do one more, and then it's going to be done. The whole thing is you can play everything you want in this, and you got the material you need. And if you need extra stuff, you can just write to me and say, how does this work? And then I say, no problem, I will send you an email. We got this.
So you said some of the influences are from German romantics and the setting is a bit Central European inspired. Would you say there's anything typically Austrian in the game?
Well, the lady who does the proofreading says I have to include a glossary of all the weird Austrian terms that just get used, and she likes them, but she's also a bit critical of whether people from northern Germany will still be able to use this simply because of the weird expressions. I'm still waiting for the northern German Hanseatic role-playing game. When is it coming?
I mean, I am Northern German, but
Yes, get to work. Do some Störtebeker for us.
yeah, I'm a forever GM, but I don't write I write my own adventures, but
There you are. Den Mantau.
So you said the core book is available in English. You published it yourself, or was it published in?
Yes, it was a bit weird process because I had no idea how to do this. And neither had Gregor, and we were both. Now, the book is finished, the script. And then there was this big question of what next. So we had the script, and happily a friend of mine, Lucas, said, well, I can do the layout. And I said, awesome. And can you still be a girlfriend after 25 years together? Well, the woman he shares his life with, Eli, is an excellent illustrator. She did the cover, she did a lot of interior work. And she said, well, she can draw this. And then other friends, Chris, Avi, a few other people who I really should name, like Sonia, they just said, let's draw this. And they drew. And then we had illustrations, and we had a layout, and we had a design. And then the book was basically ready, but it wasn't physically existing. So we went out to look for a printer, and we found the DGS-Druck in Vienna. It's nice. And the guy who ran it, Holger, he said, I have no idea whether this is going to be a sensible project, but he likes it. He's into it. He says, this is nice. I want to be part of this. And he supported us, and he said, okay, you should change this because this is causing problems. And he really took us by the hand and got us all the way through. And we printed 100 books. And then they arrived. I had a 2-room apartment, and the living room was filling up with books, big boxes. And then I started selling them, and it kind of worked. And then we had these 100 books, and they were gone. And I said, okay, we're going to print another round. And my wife was, seriously. And I was like, you have to strike the iron when it's hot. And we got to work. We printed another set of 100, and then those went away too. And it escalated from there. So basically, with every book, the workflow improved, the strategy got better, and the room in our apartment got smaller, smaller, smaller. And if you have a cubic meter that's 27 cubic feet of books, like in your living room, then you are jeopardizing your marriage. So slowly we just started changing the storage and figuring this out. And then happily, I met the Redaktion Fantastic people. And they said that they are much more professional than we are. They are just releasing Bolsung these days, which is also amazing and really incredible, and was also apparently a very big challenge because this is a boxed game.
Yeah, I interviewed the Polish creator of Volsung, and he was inspired by Karl May because they also have it in Poland.
Yes, Karl May is a thing. It's strange. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure whether I like the man, but he's inspiring. There's a lot of Karl May in all of this. Anyway, so the Redaktion Fantastic was so nice as to take over the project and to handle this. And we made a new edition of the German versions now. There were a couple of fixes and little updates. And it's always good to look at things again after a couple of years and just see what you would do different. And that really happened for the quality of the whole thing.
So you also have an English translation. Were there any problems translating some of the terms? As you said, you had some Austrianisms in there. Was there anything you stumbled across?
Well, I didn't do the translation, which was a good thing because while I certainly do my best to improve my English, I definitely have my limits. The original translator, Sina Jenisch, she put in a lot of work on this, but it soon turned out that she was not entirely familiar with the whole concept of role-playing terminology. So another friend of mine, Michael Emminger, he was so nice as to check it over. So we got a bit of the best of both worlds. We got the lyrical translation and the technical translation both in one thing. So that worked. They did struggle with the Austriacisms. And obviously, of course, in an English translation, it loses the special flavor. That is a problem. But it is always a problem that you get when you deal with translation. The Italians say, traduttore traditore. Translator is a traitor.
Was there any concept where they had to get back to you to explain what it is or to make sure how to translate it?
Well, sometimes. That was not much of an issue because we're friends. Basically, we see each other frequently. So if there's a problem, we know what we're talking about. So that was good. But this is not a professional enterprise at the level of what Pegasus or Ulysses are doing or what Hasbro is doing. Yeah. So this is all very small and nobody is really getting paid for the kind of money that they're used to and for the work they're doing.
So have you gotten feedback from Austria and Germany and then kind of a comparison how it was taken up?
Well, I think there is this famous thing about the Austrians being grumpy and thinking that everything is bad. So they did that too for Finland. But they liked it because there's this, but it's the only thing from Austria. So basically it must be good because it's the only one. Somebody did this. So most people, which I showed it to in Austria, they said, yeah, obviously it's not good because we're Austrians and we can never think that anything is good that comes from our country. But it's good because it comes from our country. So this is a big problem in Austria, and they're very strange people. That I used to play in a band too. And, if you play a concert in Austria, then people listen to your music and then they say, yeah, that was nice. And you're like, you didn't dance. And they're, yeah. And then you play a concert in Czechia and they start dancing the moment you hit the first note because they know how to party. And so in Germany, things are different because I don't know why, they think we're tremendously charming. I think they don't understand what we're saying. And so they say, this is nice. But it must be nice because they're smiling. And yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people in Germany like this a lot because it had this charming way, this whimsical way of talking about things that are, I'd say, a little bit difficult in Germany. I think that Germany also struggles with imperial history. So not only the whole National Socialism thing, obviously this is a big problem and it still is a big problem. It's a big problem in Austria, it's a big problem everywhere. But if you go back to this Kaiser Wilhelm stuff, then most Germans will be vaguely uncomfortable with it. There's this, it's okay because they didn't kill that many people, but it's still not nice. And there is very little nostalgia for it. There's no people that say, back when the emperor was in charge. Whereas in Austria, you get people that say, this is the best. We should go back there. It's very strange. So maybe this is a thing that many German people enjoyed when they looked at the Finland stuff because they said, this is something that I didn't know I could be nostalgic for and that I could like. But now that I see it, I say, well, it's nice because it's a foreigner that's doing it. So I can like this. I'm not responsible. So maybe that was that. I think they kind of enjoyed the historicity of it. I wish I had more time to write more stuff. That would be nice. But yeah, it's always a process. And obviously, it takes time to just get in the mood, so to say. You can't just sit down and just hit the keyboard. And sometimes you have to calm down. And obviously, as our lives get fuller and fuller, the time to work and to create gets shorter, and that is really an issue. But yeah, this is what you get.
So thank you for listening to episode 16 of The World of RPGs. The intro music was by Thomas Muzio and the logo by Albert Karakash. A special thanks goes out to all my interviewees in Austria that helped bring this together. And as always, you can find links to their material in the show notes. And I don't have a recommendation for any other podcasts or websites this time because I wanted to get some episodes out while I'm on vacation. Now, you might think I would do Switzerland next, since it's also mostly German speaking, but actually Switzerland has a couple of languages, and I think we need to do France first. And France is, again, a big country, and as you've heard in the Germany episode, that took a lot of work. So I'm going to a really small one now. And now we have a first because the actual play will be in English.
I look over to the group. So, what will happen if you fail and Nian gets angered? You are going to get blamed.
Leon turns that is true. If Nian really is angered, will the village not pay the price?
So, would they not thank you as their heroes?
Here to be thanked. But if Nian indeed needs a sacrifice and we do not succeed, he will have at least 6.
Guys, this is like nature 101. You have like food chain and you have guy at top and then you have like rest of things. We are rest of things. Like, you're like, oh, humans are bad. Oh, kill all of the nature, make the world like it's bullshit. Like really.
For real, you can go and try to save. You can sacrifice yourself. But if you fail and he is angered, he is going to take apart the town. And what then?
For me, I will try. If you don't want to be here, that's fine too. I understand. You may have your reservations, seeing as this Nien must by now have a penchant for eating old people.
No.
We remind him of
It's like jerky. It's like because it's leather, like it's like
Dog chew toys?
gum for like what's those?
And jerky.
Yeah.
It's like dog chew
salty
toys.
and dry and oh, so delicious.
Yeah.
No.
Well, failure is then not an option.
Wupin looks at you. Sorry, Wupin looks at you. I know a few people. I can muster up a few people who are willing to rush to the defense. They'd rather die than see their parents be slaughtered as sacrifices.
As they should. As they should. Yep.
Absolutely.
Makes you happy.
I will take.
He tends to. It's something I'd rather not do, but I'm not very happy about it. But it's something I'm willing to do.
I'm with you.
Oh,
Is that
someone
Tom's?
broke window over there.
You see a child like looking like you see him throw a rock and like runs off.
I don't think he's happy with us.
Yes.
Young man. Life is
like
a
apples
series
or
of
grapes,
natural,
like
spontaneous changes. Do not resist them. That only creates sorrow. Let reality.
He ran into gum. Oh my god, that little child.
As with that child, let things flow naturally forward and go wherever they like. We will go with.
Serves you right. Don't like run inside places. Just like be walk at cool.